Let's go down the rabbit hole, but first, in this video we will expose magic tricks ordinary people aren't supposed to know. So please read the following oath out loud before proceeding to watch this video, and wonder, do you really want to know this? Because once you know, and there isn't any turning back. As a magician, I promise never to reveal the secret of any illusion to a non-magician, unless that one swears to uphold the magician's oath in turn. I promise never to perform any illusion for a non-magician without first practicing the effect until I can perform it well enough to maintain the illusion of magic. Now we got that out of the way, let's continue with the video. But a disclaimer, the information you're about to receive, are you sure you really want to know it? In this documentary, we will dive into the following questions. Do we have a democracy in the Western world? Who controls our world? And which dirty tricks do they use to stay in control? Like Voltaire said, if you want to know who controls you, look at who you are not allowed to criticize. I know in statecraft we need the department of dirty tricks, but you have to admit now it's out of control and it's just criminal. And the dirty tricks go way too far. But unfortunately, these people have lost their loyalty against their democratic elected superiors, and now a cabal of crooks has tried to take over our world. Time we restore this system to its former glory and make the world great again.
First, yes, they have the bounty on me because you remember the Venezuelan election last July 28th that looked like the whole world said is nonsense, and they 17 Latin American states said we won't recognize it, Carter, all that stuff. Do you remember the out of hand?
Yes.
They think I hacked their election. And I'll tell you why they think I hacked their election. In a typical Venezuelan election, what happens is the dictator gets 2 million votes, the opposition gets 7 million votes, and then they stuff 5.5 million ballots. So they 7.5 million beat 7, and they win time and time and time again. 4 years ago, they introduced a new system. You have to give not just your ID, but your thumbprint when you vote in Venezuela. They say it's for security. What their system really does is it ties your ballot. When you're Venezuelan, you vote, it ties your ballot to your image, to your thumbprint. So they can look up how you voted, Alex, and go in and see how you voted and arrest the right people. Now, that creates a problem. How do you stuff 5.5 million ballots when you don't have those 5.5 million thumbs? They have a secret tool that is in every precinct that their people use to, it generates the 9-digit code as if a valid thumb was put in it and opens the machine so it can take a ballot. And so that's how it works. So they have this secret tool, and that tool was working right up through Saturday, July 27th at midnight. But at 12:01, their secret cheating tool started spitting out random 9-digit numbers. They couldn't stuff. By noon, they went crazy because all over the country, they weren't able to stuff. Venezuela canceled all its normally they have TV, and as the votes roll in all day, they say, oh, what do you know, we just won by a hair again. This time, they canceled all their television. They came out the next morning, and we said, hey, we won 51-49, screw you. And they rounded up 2,000 protest leaders. And the whole world said this is a garbage election. Well, 10 days later, when they opened up their secret cheating tool, they discovered something that made them think that I might know something about these facts, Alex, and they came to the conclusion that I don't think I did it. So that's why they put the $25 million bounty on me. I have for 4 years been saying this all leads through Venezuela to the ultimate chairman of the board of this operation is China, of this whole system. Iran is the paymaster. They are the secret paymaster, so none of this shows up in bank wires the U.S. can see. But what we've learned, going through Elon Musk's Doge data, we have some researchers who've put together, just in like 2 weeks ago, what I opened the show telling you. In reality, this garbage technology has spread through the world, not just because of China, but because of the CIA. They have been, under the guise of modernizing elections, they've had the USAID fund and George Soros staff and Arlington, Virginia NGO called CEPS, which you should probably look up CEPS, what is CEPS, and that's CEPS. Its mission is to modernize elections by spreading Smartmatic. And all over the world, now if you pull up the next graphic, you will see, and Alex is putting this up online, you can see all the nations. We have been funded 26 nations, from the Philippines, to Bolivia, Estonia, everything, to put in Smartmatic.
And this is all breaking right now at Real Alex Jones on X.
No one knows this. We put this together 2 weeks ago. The government has just received this data themselves.
So this has been posted at Real Alex Jones, or I was
The
right.
CIA was behind this with China, not the top of the CIA. Mike Pompeo and his CIA was involved in the 2020 hack. The top of the CIA was. And that's why they're going ballistic. And they've been behind the spread of this technology through 26. And everywhere they put this technology, it started July 09, which is 6 months after Obama came in, Obama and Brennan. Everywhere they put this technology, we've researched, they've had within a few years, they get some election where suddenly they elect an AOC or an Obama or some left-wing person that they never expected to elect. It's all been on this technology that you, the taxpayer, paid for this Arlington, Virginia CEPS to spread through the world.
So maybe we are going a bit fast for the people who aren't so well informed as Patrick Byrne, aka the real James Bond. But in History of the Intelligence State, Mike Benz perfectly explains how it came to this and what's going on. And he also shows the receipts, which Dodge later found. And he explains also what the ignoration of organized political warfare from George Kennan 1948 has to do with it. Because the misuse of this secret pact allowed crooks to organize a coup against our democratic leaders and take over the Western world.
Thank you, Hillsdale, for having me and the incredible work that you're doing. Today's topic is the history of the intelligence state, and what I'm going to try to describe to you is the shape of the beast that we are up against and that has targeted so many people in this room. The best way to understand is to actually start the story in the middle, and then we will go back in time to the founding of the country. We'll sort of speed run the essential history, and then all the way up into the present. But we're going to start in the year 1948. This is the sort of 0 AD of the founding of the intelligence capacities of the U.S. government. And instead of sort of doing what you'll learn in an ordinary history book, we're going to start with a document that I'm curious if anyone has ever seen. It's called The Inauguration of Organized Political Warfare. Anyone ever seen that document in this room? How many people in this room know the name George Kennan? Okay, 75% of the hands went up. Did you know that George Kennan in 1948 wrote this memo called The Inauguration of Organized Political Warfare, in which he's famous for folks who are not familiar. George Kennan is sort of known as a sort of godfather figure of American diplomacy and the Central Intelligence Agency. He was famous for this long telegram, the chief strategist of the containment strategy of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But before all that, when all of this was getting started, he penned this top secret memo, which was not declassified for 60 years. It was declassified in 2005, that I think helps elucidate the story as we're going to proceed here. We're going to go through this memo, but I want to give some context first. The Inauguration of Organized Political Warfare was written just 12 days after the Central Intelligence Agency did its first government overthrow operation, its first election rigging event.
Wait, what did he just say?
The Central Intelligence Agency did its first government overthrow operation, its first election rigging event.
This can be true, right? We live in a democracy. I voted, or did I?
That was on April 18th, 1948, and this was written just 12 days after that. And the particular focus was what had just happened in Italy. Italy was having its first democratic election after World War II, and it posited a US-backed candidate on the one hand and a Russia-backed candidate on the other. And when the rules-based international order was being established in 1948, and we had these coordinating bodies through the National Security Council, the very first memo I have just on screen here emphasizes how important it is for the U.S. to control the political affairs of Italy. You'll see National Security Council memo 1-1 is titled "The Positioning of the United States with Respect to Italy." Kennan wrote, "Italy is obviously the key point. If the communists win there, our whole position would probably be undermined." Now, what happened in this case was in 1947, the Central Intelligence Agency was established under the National Security Act, and it was originally intended to have intelligence focus on gathering and analysis. But because of the key importance perceived by the U.S. State Department to influence the course of the Italian election, it developed a makeshift ad hoc, thrown together at the last minute, $250 million operation to swing that election in favor of the candidate that the U.S. government preferred. And I just have some statistics here and a little bit of context because we're going to see this as a repeating theme. So
let's make a long, boring story short. What started in 1948 grew to be US aid, funding crime, terrorism, election rigging all over the world, and not even obeying commands of their elected superiors anymore. But let's jump over to JP Sears from Awaken with GP to get his opinion on US aid.
U.S. aid. It's allegedly an agency created by Congress to do good things. I'll tell you about that in a second. U.S. aid. When Elon's team came in, it's like, yeah, we gotta look at your files. We're doing efficiency stuff here. They said, no, you're not gonna look at our files. That was, I believe, Saturday night, and Trump has then shut them down. It's like, what were those executives at U.S. aid trying to hide? Well, we got some of what they were trying to hide, ladies and gentlemen. Here is a synopsis of it. Now, there's some legal stuff. Legal looking stuff. It's not actually legal. But here's the gist of it. This is the tip of the iceberg, and this is a pretty big tip of an iceberg, ladies and gentlemen. Summarized here with this tweet that Elon retweeted. Let me get this straight. Fauci's NIAID and USAID sent over $40 million in U.S. taxpayer support to a scientist in Wuhan, China, who was working on bat coronavirus emergence research, who also became patient zero for COVID-19. Congratulations to him. That's a big accomplishment. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you might be thinking, Biden pardoning Fauci certainly makes a lot of sense now, and it made a lot of sense to begin with. It just makes more sense now. If we start thinking for ourselves, with the information we just saw, that information alone, we would say this agency that Trump is shutting down and cleaning out because it is nothing but a ball of corrupt trash using your and I's money, because they have no money themselves. They use taxpayer money, which means it's our money, to do devious work. Devious work number one, start a pandemic. Was it a serious pandemic? No, it was taken very seriously, though. That's a huge problem. So they were using our money to the tune of $40 million, sending it to, well, a lab in Wuhan, China, doing bat coronavirus research. And the scientists they were sending it to at that lab became the first person to get infected with COVID-19. Now you might say, I didn't know that scientist also went to the wet market to lick the pangolin that had COVID-19 that came from nature, just natural emergence. Well, that's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. And you have to ask yourself, aside from like pandemic, we know it, crimes against humanity. Yes. Save that discussion for another time, though, because the first discussion, just point blank range, is an agency that uses $40 million to fund research that allegedly sets off a worldwide pandemic that then becomes the justification used to usher in totalitarian lockdowns and control for multiple years. Is that a wise use of U.S. taxpayer money? No. Okay. Well, who was stewarding that money? USAID. Okay. Not only did they waste that money, they put it to a very destructive use. If everything else they did was gold, that's still cause to shut them down. The problem is everything else they have done is not gold. It is putrid dog poop with syphilis. Next up, so stuff is coming out left, right, and center about USAID. It's just every time you look, it's like there's another terrible thing. They're funding transgender stuff in other countries, woke Sesame Street, using millions of dollars to do things like this.
The Taliban is classified, and if you don't know, the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan. They're classified as a specially designated global terrorist organization by OFAC. So post 2021, so this is last year, 2024, we spent $697 million of the taxpayers' dollars in Afghanistan, including $534,719,000 in change from USAID in Afghanistan. I don't know what we think we're going to change in Afghanistan. We lost 22,000, lost or wounded 22,500 Americans in Afghanistan over the course of our term there in the war, spending over $2 trillion. We're just going to keep on spending because somehow we think it's going to get better. And if you're wondering who's in charge of Afghanistan getting the money, and that money I just mentioned, the $697 million is on top of, and is in addition to the weekly to every 10-day shipments in cash of $40 to $80 million. Afghanistan is ruled by folks named Sarajuddin Haqqani. The Haqqani network mean anything to anybody in the room? How about Abdullah bin Laden? Who gets some of that money? Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Because your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding. If you think that the program under Operation Enduring Sentinel, entitled Women's Scholarship Endowment, which receives $60 million annually, or the Young Women Lead, which gets about $5 million annually, is going to women who, by the way, if you read the Inspector General's report, is telling you that the Taliban does not allow women to speak in public. Yet somehow you're believing, and American people are supposed to believe, that this money is going for the betterment of the women in Afghanistan. It is not. You are funding terrorism, and it's coming through USAID. And it's not just Afghanistan, because Pakistan's right next door. USAID spent $840 million in the last 20 years on Pakistan's education-related program. It includes $136 million to build 120 schools, of which there is zero evidence that any of them were built. Why would there be any evidence? The Inspector General can't get in to see them. But you know what? We doubled down and spent $20 million from USAID to create educational television programs for children unable to attend the physical school. Yeah, they can't attend it because it doesn't exist. You paid for it. Somebody else got the money. You are paying for terrorism. This has got to end.
So we're going to hit some of the highlights, but first, here's President Trump just telling it like it is, talking about USAID being shut down.
Or what's going on there?
Well, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
So getting them out, and then the decision to be made is presumably, do you just trash the agency, or do you keep it alive and just restock it with better people? It's a good question. Right now, I don't know if it's salvageable. I think it was started on fraudulent terms. More on that in a second, because you're like, what's this USAID? First, a couple other devious things, which, by the way, if you want a resource on all things government corruption, Mike Benz is your guy. He is not only a wealth of information on this USAID agency, but so much more. He did an episode with Joe Rogan maybe a month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago. It is a mind blower. You have to follow him, Mike Benz. You can see his Twitter account right here. Here's Elon's summary of his tweet. USAID has been paying media organizations to publish their propaganda. And Mike Benz brings some of those receipts. Wow, how glorious is that? USAID has been pushing censorship laws in Europe. Mike Benz's tweet, this is the biggest ticking time bomb on the internet, the single biggest existential threat to U.S. free speech and the revenue models of all U.S. social media companies. And yes, it's USAID's fault too. Ooh, coming in hot. Meanwhile, the Democrats are freaking out that this is being shut down. They are against the movement that's rooting out corruption. You might be on the wrong team. You just might. Maybe not. But you probably are. 84 playbook, you make bad things sound good. So let's make it sound good. What do? It's the U.S. government agency responsible for administering foreign aid and developmental assistance to support economic growth, improve health and education, promote democracy. Boy, do they promote democracy. You'll enjoy the next clip. And respond to humanitarian crises around the world. Yeah, it kind of sounds like Bill Gates, doesn't it? And by the way, this morning, Bill Gates was all over the news. He was on The View, so he went on the credible shows. And he's talking about how terrible this is. He said, USAID, it's not a partisan issue. I donate to all the causes USAID does. Okay, Bill, I'm pretty glad it's shut down and their beautiful charitable work. When I saw that, it's like, this sounds like stuff Bill Gates says he does. And then this morning, Bill Gates is trying to run cover for USAID. It's like, have y'all not learned this is not the guy to run cover for you? But anyway, he's just like, yeah, this is what I do. It's really important stuff. It's like, I'm really glad it's shut down. So we mentioned there, boy, we can't mention that enough, that a really important aspect of the work that USAID does is promoting democracy, right? Promoting democracy. How do they promote democracy? Well, let's check out RFK Jr. spilling the beans to Tucker Carlson about how they promote democracy. And, spoiler alert, before he spills the juice on that, he talks about, USAID, it's a CIA front organization, meaning it's in kind of like a shell organization the CIA set up. So the CIA can do things they're not allowed to do while looking like it's not them. By the way, on The View today, Bill Gates said, if this USAID shutdown isn't rectified, there will be another pandemic. Thank you for the threat, Bill. You can go sit right down too. Here's RFK Jr. talking just a little bit about USAID and how they promote democracy to Tucker Carlson.
2014, there are riots in, it's called the Maidan Rebellion in Ukraine, which we're not told that we are financing those riots. The newspapers never told us, our government never told us. USAID, which is a CIA front, put $5 billion into funding those riots.
Just so you know, he said $5 billion of our taxpayer money into funding riots in Ukraine to do what? Stay tuned.
Those riots lead to a coup d'etat against the first democratically elected government of the Ukraine.
Okay, let's break that down for the people in the back. The USAID, which part of their mission statement is they help promote democracy. Cool, thanks for doing that. How do you do it? Well, they used $5 billion to fund riots in the Ukraine that leads to the overthrow of the first ever democratically elected government in the Ukraine. So you overthrow the first democratically elected government in the Ukraine? Yes, we did. And we did it to promote democracy. Cool. So then is installed Zelensky, not a democratically elected leader, but remember, we're promoting democracy here. It's great. And Zelensky, not too long ago, well, he canceled the democratic elections in Ukraine. He did it also to help save democracy in Ukraine. So I dare say US aid, their promotional efforts for democracy in the Ukraine, it helps democracy grow in both Ukraine and here in the US. Boy, what'll the world be like without them anymore?
Because you lie to the outside world, you need to also lie to your own citizens to keep the outside from finding out. So while the lies may help you successfully acquire an empire, you now have to permanently maintain an empire of lies, not just abroad, but at home. Okay. Now, in 1948, when the founding fathers of the intelligence state were setting this all up, they were intensely aware of the monster they were making. And in 1948, Congress passed the Smith-Mundt Act, because again, in 1948 is when all of this was getting established. The CIA was brand new, NSC 10-2 had just come out, and Congress said, okay, listen, you guys are creating a monster here. We want to make sure that we don't build this empire of lies and that Americans are not being inundated with this sprawl of information control that you are conducting around the world in order to conduct organized political warfare on all countries on planet Earth. And I think many folks in this room are probably familiar with what happened during the Obama administration, which was this essential safeguard, which had been with us since the moment this all was created in 1948, was repealed with quite little fanfare. It was tucked into an NDAA. It was really, I think, only discovered by the public after the damage had been done that the Smith-Mundt was modernized to get rid of that restriction. It was effectively amended. And so the headline here is U.S. repeals propaganda ban, spreads government-made news to Americans. For decades, this anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's mammoth broadcasting arm, I should say arms, from delivering programming to American audiences. We're about to meet. But even right out the gate, the Central Intelligence Agency immediately moved into the media space to control the messaging that people around the world experienced. And so I have on screen Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Asia, dozens of others. They were CIA proprietary media. This is Frank Wisner. Frank Wisner was the spearhead of this early CIA media control apparatus. The name comes from the Wurlitzer sort of piano-like organ, because Wisner would brag that he could play in the international news as if it was a Wurlitzer. He could have any narrative carried in any country on earth because of the vast sprawl of media control that this newly formed intelligence agency, which was leveraging essentially the Office of War Information's Pentagon media network created during World War II, to thousands of partnered media outlets on all 6 populated continents. At that time, 1/3 of CIA's budget went just to funding media organizations. And today that number is paralleled by the web of CIA cutouts that we'll meet when we get to 1983 and beyond, and how this initial structure changed after the scandals of the 1970s. This was popularly called the Department of Dirty Tricks, this NSC 10-2 plausible deniability power to essentially play God around the world. This was their term, Department of Dirty Tricks. And just because it's somewhat funny, you'll see this is Max Boot just a few years ago calling for us to make a more robust Department of Dirty Tricks. Why the United States needs to sabotage, undermine, and expose its enemies. And you'll see that this is a CIA story. CIA is underlined there on the second one, but notice that it goes way beyond that, the dirty tricks. It's the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Central Intelligence Agency Director, and the Administrator of USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, to create political warfare career tracks and attract people who find political warfare rewarding and attractive. So one essential way to cut through how this is structured is to understand that there's a key distinction between the American homeland and the American empire. We live in the American homeland, but the American empire is everywhere else. And today, even all of the major U.S. domiciled corporations get the lion's share of their markets, their revenues, their supply chain resources from everywhere else on Earth. We are actually, even though we are a big country, we pale in comparison to the globe. And the issue is when people on the homeland want to put their own interests first, they run up against the empire managers and therefore against this blob apparatus we're going to see, therefore against the intelligence state. And what I have here is in this inauguration of organized political warfare, you see that even though the emphasis is on giving the CIA this capacity, the entire thing is coordinated by the US State Department, which does not have a plausible deniability license. It's supposed to be our official US government policy. But secretly, the CIA answers to the State Department in all things, and we're going to dive into the structure on that. You'll see there at the bottom, this whole operation has to be answerable to the Secretary of State, who directs the whole in coordination. While covert political warfare must be controlled by the State Department, the direction should not physically be in the State Department. This is more true when it's realized that the considerable funds necessary for such an operation could not be concealed in the department's budget. So they have to hide what they're doing from the American people and from foreign countries who, if there was transparency about how our own taxpayer dollars were being spent, they would know their countries are being targeted for overthrow. So the State Department can't conceal it. So we need this web of other government agencies, including the intelligence services, to park the money there. So again, the coordination of covert operations with overt conduct should be accomplished through the Office of the Secretary of State and Undersecretary. And our proposal is that this tradition be revised to further American national interests. So that is the linchpin of this, which is this concept of U.S. national interest next to the Department of Defense, because it was not actually called the Department of Defense at the time. It was called the Department of War. And it kept that name for 150 years until 1948, exactly when the CIA was created, exactly when the Smith-Mundt Act came out, exactly when the UN Declaration on Human Rights forbade the military from taking over the world. And so we simply did something cute and we said, okay, we are no longer the War Department, we are forward defending ourselves. We're about defense, actually, but we're just going to do the same things we were doing before, but we're not allowed to say war anymore because that's outlawed. We started off as just this mainland, the homeland that we're in, and today our reach is in every country and on every continent. There is a State Department regional desk. There's an assistant secretary whose job is to make sure the right politician wins in every single country on Earth. So the assistant secretary for Europe and Eurasian affairs is going to have a portfolio of 15 different European countries. Every one of those countries has elections. Every one of those elections has a State Department preference. They will back channel with all parties. One will be better for U.S. national interests, the other won't. And that assistant secretary's job is to influence the course of political events in that country, to conduct organized political warfare using plausible deniability in order to achieve that outcome. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't, but that is their job.
So let's listen to that last part again, because it's really important.
Today, our reach is in every country and on every continent. There is a State Department regional desk. There's an assistant secretary whose job is to make sure the right politician wins in every single country on Earth. So the assistant secretary for Europe and Eurasian affairs is going to have a portfolio of 15 different European countries. Every one of those countries has elections. Every one of those elections has a State Department preference. They will back channel with all parties. One will be better for U.S. national interests, the other won't. And that assistant secretary's job is to influence the course of political events in that country, to conduct organized political warfare using plausible deniability in order to achieve that outcome. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't, but that is their job.
Now, how would they achieve such democracy? I hope not with heart attack guns or so.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. And a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was him.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for?
We have indeed.
For killing people?
The round thing at the top is obviously the sight. It works by electricity. There's a battery in the handle, and it fires a small dart.
And the dart itself, when it strikes the target, does the target know that he's been hit and about to die?
A special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
As a murder instrument, that's about as efficient as you can get, isn't it?
It is a weapon, a very serious weapon.
Luckily, these days, such cruel technology would never be used, right? To intimidate or kill innocent people because of political views? Let's listen a bit to Dr. James Giordano from DARPA and his lecture The Brain is the Battlefield of the Future at West Point, and his books are also very interesting.
Utilize weapons in more of a soft approach, as I mentioned earlier. The more I know about what makes you tick, the more I might be able to do things like weaponize the approach that I then take towards you in my interactions and engagements with you. Here we can utilize the brain sciences for psychological operations. Most notably, one of the DARPA programs run by the program manager Bill Casebeer, Dr. Bill Casebeer, who subsequently went on to be a program manager at Lockheed Martin and run their brain-machine interfacing programs. Bill Casebeer's program was called Narrative Networks. And one component of the Narrative Networks project was something called neural narratives. If we understand how it is that brains and individuals, groups, and populations respond to certain forms of imaging, memes, iconographies, engagements, the more we may be able to tailor those things through our psychological operations, propaganda, meso, to be able to engage these individuals in more positive ways or in ways that are more influential, to be able to direct their behaviors, their predispositions, and perhaps their engagements with us on a variety of levels from the individual all the way up to the political. But then, of course, we move into the more harder forms of weapons, things such as bullets and bombs. And here, once again, let me reiterate what we're talking about on the neuro side are drugs, bugs, toxins, and devices. But of course, if we spill over the idea of soft weaponology into a hard weaponization, we also see the use of biodata as a viable weapon. Manipulating biodata so that I can then put into your particular medical records subtle information that may change the disposition of whether you're sick or not, change how you're treated, influence the postures that go to you in terms of insurance, care, viability for military service. By altering that information, by changing those data, by purloining those data, I essentially change the you of you. And I can do that in very subtle and insidious ways. Furthermore, I can do that on a variety of different levels that can affect key individuals, so that in fact your medical record changes to thereby render you incapable or at least invalid to be able to serve in a way you're serving. Or I can do that on a much larger scale, groups, populations. And if I change those data, I change the way you're being regarded and treated. And I can do that in one of two ways. I can do it in such a way that you're going to be regarded in a negative sense, or I can do that in such a way that I'm going to treat you incorrectly. If I say, for example, you have a particular allergy, or you have particular sensitivities, or you have a particular disorder, you will be treated for that, and that could then harm your health and your stability in both a short wars approach as well as a long wars approach. But if we take a look at this in a little more detail, you can see that once again it folds back to the idea of what can we do to ours and what can be done to others.
The next image here is just the FBI. The FBI was created in 1908. The Justice Department had been around for about 60 years before that. But the FBI was created in the run-up to World War I, and its first serious operation was rounding up anti-war protesters to World War I and working to undermine their ability to use the U.S. Postal Service and other means to get their messages out. The FBI is one of our 17 intelligence agencies. So again, this preceded 1948. This preceded the CIA. We have 17 intelligence agencies. Only 2 of them face domestically.
So let's listen what Ted Gunderson, former FBI chief of California, has to say on this topic.
And look what's happened in the last 23 years. A disgrace. I personally investigated the Oklahoma City bombing case. Huge cover-up. Jack Kennedy's assassination, huge cover-up. Bobby Kennedy's assassination, huge cover-up. World Trade Center, huge cover-up. Okay. Terrorism. They're using it as an excuse to take away our constitutional rights and our civil liberties. The Bilderbergs.
The other one besides the FBI that's domestic is DHS, which of course was after 9/11.
9/11. So let's listen to the opinion of Mark Rossini, an FBI agent investigating the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 attacks, which dramatically changed all of our lives with the implementation of the Patriot Act, for example.
And that is the crux of the matter, and that is the truth, and no one has ever answered those questions. No one has the balls to, because they're afraid, because the house will come tumbling down.
So how exactly did the CIA try to recruit the 9/11 hijackers? Well, one amazing thing about their arrival is that they didn't try to hide. The hijackers used their real names while in the United States. They operated in plain daylight. Al-Hazmi and Al-Midhar lived in San Diego for more than a year before the attacks. They lived openly. In fact, they were so open that Hazmi's name, address, and a home phone number were listed in the San Diego phone book. When they arrived, the hijackers encountered a Saudi intel operative called Omar al-Bayoumi. They met at a restaurant outside of Los Angeles.
The CIA utilized the Saudis in the form of Omar al-Bayoumi to spy for them and to gather intelligence.
Before 9/11, the CIA was forbidden from engaging in domestic spying. They used the Saudi intelligence as a workaround.
We'll rely upon the Saudi GID, General Intelligence Directorate, their version of the CIA, via Prince Bandar, via their man, Omar al-Bayoumi, to keep us informed as to the activity of these terrorists.
Bayoumi's notebook, which was uncovered when British law enforcement raided his home in the UK, contained a drawing of an airplane and mathematical calculations related to flying it. The 9/11 Commission investigators never saw this. At the time, al-Bayoumi had a no-show job at a Saudi aviation contractor called Avco. The company's employees say he was one of roughly 50 ghost employees working there at the time, taking the paycheck but never coming to work. According to declassified government documents, an investigator from the 9/11 Commission said al-Bayoumi was receiving substantial sums of money from the Saudi embassy in Washington prior to the 9/11 attacks, that the money was being funneled from accounts at Riggs Bank in Georgetown belonging to Haifa bin Faisal, the wife of the Saudi ambassador to the United States. By using the Saudis as a proxy to recruit the 9/11 hijackers, the CIA gave itself cover. If things went wrong, they could push a narrative that blamed the Saudi government for the attacks, which is what they did.
For all intents and purposes, Omar al-Bayoumi was an employee of the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C., in their consulate in Los Angeles, California.
Al-Bayoumi convinced the hijackers to move to San Diego. He helped them find an apartment. He served as a co-signer on the lease to that apartment. He paid their first month's rent and deposit. He got them bank accounts. He got them driver's license. He introduced them to many other radical Muslims in the area, including the cleric Anwar al-Awlaki. Eventually, al-Midhar went home to Yemen.
Khalid al-Midhar leaves America for his daughter's birth, right? And in that time, he loses his passport. He claims he went to Afghanistan. He goes back to Jeddah and gets another passport. And by this time, even prior, as I understand it now, the Saudis had identified the terrorists, the hijackers, as potential threats to the kingdom and had put chips in their passports identifying them as a threat. Al-Midhar comes back to the United States, I believe it was on July 4th, 2001. He's allowed back in, not stopped, not questioned. So here's a guy that the CIA knew came to America, had been at a terrorist summit meeting in Malaysia in January 2000. He's allowed to leave and come back.
Midhar was able to exit and enter the country at will because he was issued a multi-visit U.S. visa. According to a summary of an interview with an FBI agent from Alex Station, quote, Al-Hamzi and al-Midhar obtained their visas to enter the United States at the American consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. All told, the vast majority of the 19 9/11 hijackers had their visas issued at that consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. At the time, John Brennan was running the CIA station there. Just a few days before al-Midhar re-entered the country at JFK Airport in New York, the FBI and the CIA held a joint meeting in New York City to discuss the bombing of the USS Cole, which al-Midhar was involved in.
And killed 17 soldiers on the USS Cole.
An FBI agent was shown a photograph of al-Midhar taken at the summit in Kuala Lumpur. The agent asked the CIA who this man was, but the CIA once again refused to tell them. It wasn't until August of 2001 that the CIA finally alerted the FBI. And of course, by then, it was too late. It's not just Mark Rossini who testifies to this. Another anonymous FBI agent told investigators that, quote, she believed the CIA's operation may have spun out of control, and that they, the CIA, came to the FBI with limited information in an attempt to locate the hijackers without revealing the true nature or extent of their operation against al-Qaeda, end quote.
This is the failure of the 9/11 Commission and every other fucking commission that ever existed after that.
And then the final image here I have of a sort of essential history in the speed run is simply Woodrow Wilson, because he is the sort of spiritual godfather of the doctrine that organized political warfare would be grafted under, because his mission to make the world safe for democracy allowed us to pull a very cute trick when the world transitioned from hard power to soft power as the primary means to run an empire, which was that you no longer had to have a national security threat to use the national security state. You could simply promote democracy, and under the banner of promoting democracy, you could do the dirtiest of deeds. You could do demolition, sabotage, black propaganda. You could work with the criminal underworld, again, as I mentioned, in Italy and Iran and dozens of countries. You could rig elections, you could stuff ballot boxes, but it's all to promote democracy, even if there is no threat to the American people, and even if it only benefits a small coterie of financial and corporate stakeholders working with the US State Department. So what happened after 1948? There's an image here on the left, which is just a list of CIA regime change operations after Italy. You don't need to blow it up on screen or anything, but essentially there were 85 countries that the CIA orchestrated coups in on the back of this Italy operation.
So let's hear that part again. 85 countries, what now?
But essentially there were 85 countries that the CIA orchestrated coups in on the back of this Italy operation that George Kennan and the rest of the State Department officials were so inspired by. They did, in fact, achieve the goal that they set out to, which was to broaden this to virtually every country, continent, and region on Earth, and to capacity build these networks whether we needed them or not. 50 of those, by the way, happened just during the Eisenhower administration between 1952 and 1960, just right out the gate in the 1950s. And by the early 1960s, this began to come home and caused the first real, well, it led to the chain of events that caused the first real structural change to the way the intelligence state works. And this was the intelligence state was doing to the new left at the time what they are currently doing to the populist right. There was this new faction within the Democrat Party that was not necessarily all limousine liberals. A lot of them were anti-war protesters, or they, because of the Third World People's Movement's popularity at the time and a lot of the civil rights struggles and ethnic identity struggles that were happening at the time, many people in the Democrat Party were positioning themselves both socially, politically, and informationally aligned with countries that were being targeted by the Central Intelligence Agency. It was seen as a right-wing force because it was targeting socialist and communist governments, primarily actually just to sort of privatize the assets the state industries held. But the CIA began to do more and more the same things against the left then that they're doing against the populist right now. So just have a few images on screen. Huge CIA operation reported in U.S. against anti-war forces. The CIA was actually bribing the National Association of Students. They launched something called Operation Chaos, basically designed at permanently shaping the composition of the Democrat Party to purge this new but very popular populist leftist faction out. And tell me if that sounds familiar. In terms of the intelligence state, is not targeting George Bush or Mitt Romney or John McCain. It is only targeting one faction of the conservative wing of the GOP in order to purge that out. The next image I have here on screen is COINTELPRO. This was on the FBI side, but it was done in tandem with the Central Intelligence Agency. The COINTEL refers to counterintelligence, which is basically when the FBI is dealing with threats from foreign countries using this foreign predicate. I'll get to that a little bit more in a second here. Now, the first thing that forced the restructuring of the intelligence state into its current form was a series of scandals that led up to and ultimately culminated in what was called the Church Committee hearing. Also, there's a Pike Committee. Yeah, on the left here is Frank Church. He was the Democrat senator who spearheaded those hearings. It was the first time the Central Intelligence Agency ever had congressional oversight. It had been around for 30 years, and members of Congress were not allowed to see what it was doing. There was no oversight. There was no accountability. There was no, hey, let me look at that. There was no Gang of Eight. It was only with the Church Committee that we created a House Intelligence Committee to have a select handful of members of the House be able to do oversight. It was only then that we created the Senate Intelligence Committee to do the same on the Senate side. And this is Frank Church here on the left holding up the famous heart attack gun, which was in the CIA assassination guide and in their research and development. They were assassinating world leaders. They were assassinating political dissidents all over the world. And they were working on ever more extreme ways to kill people and get away with it in order to adhere to their government license to plausible deniability. And so the heart attack gun was you can look this up on YouTube. It's a fascinating congressional clip. This was done in open hearing of Congress with the director of the Central Intelligence Agency testifying and explaining this heart attack gun, which was that it would fire essentially a kind of dart so that the cause of death, it would induce a heart attack so that the cause of death would look like it came from a heart attack rather than a murder. On the right here, this is Christopher Pyle. Christopher Pyle was one of the first people to get this ball rolling, not from the CIA side, but from the U.S. Army. At that time, he was a whistleblower who had provided very damning evidence that, in his words, any public meeting that happens in the United States with 20 or more people, the U.S. military wants to know what they're talking about and has active operations to survey and infiltrate any mass gathering of any political group, right, left, mothers knitting groups, religious groups. And he came forward with troves of documents around this, that the U.S. perceived that it was necessary, that the U.S. military perceived that it was necessary to maintain political control over the civilian class in order to prevent any popular bills from getting passed or people from getting elected who might undermine the military agenda. So a basic total usurpation of the concept that we have a democracy with a civilian-run government.
Luckily, these days we have AI, Cerberus, Vault 7, Prism, Palantir, and systems like this. And together with EMF-readable DNA, and most of us carrying around 24/7 voluntary tracking and listening device called a smartphone, they don't need more spies to spy on us. They literally know everything about all of us.
ID will make our interactions with each other and with the state faster, cheaper, and more reliable. It will allow us to judge who has a right to be in our country and who doesn't, and so solves one of the major challenges of immigration. Facial recognition can now spot suspects in real time from live video, tracking organized criminals at borders, in public spaces, even helping find missing people. In London, live facial recognition led to 360 arrests by the Met Police between January and October 2024, just in a pilot project. It boosts response times and helps identify suspects quickly in busy places like train stations and events. Live video from body cams and CCTVs can be used to provide real-time advice to officers from a command center or deploy resources to where they're most needed. AI will go even further, spotting crime patterns, guiding patrols, and streamlining decisions. This is where technology, like digital ID, becomes critical. My institute's own analysis shows that introducing this in the UK would save at least $2 billion a year and likely more by reducing losses to fraud, improving tax collection, and better targeting of state support. We can ensure that digital ID enhances rather than threatens personal privacy.
It's an issue to do with the technology and the digital infrastructure. I just want to emphasize how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
At that time, people who were thought leaders in this targeted section of the Democrat Party became to be aware, because of these disclosures, that basically everything in the world around them was not real. Their media, their culture, their music, all of these things were actually being used as instruments of statecraft, and in many cases against them directly.
En deal je dan ook met partijen om tot zo'n moment te komen? Heb je een onderhandeling? Ontmoet je ze? Bellen, voorlichters, adviseurs?
In een opwelling heb ik toen werd ik gebeld en in een opwelling heb ik wel gezegd, luister eens, we kunnen ook Wilders premier maken als je dat wilt. Hè? Dus je doet het via ons voortaan. Ja, misschien moet je dit niet onthullen, maar dit is wel een beetje hoe het gaat.
So what I have here on the left is from the Senate Intelligence Committee, notes from the church, a memo from the Church Committee hearing. CIA's use of journalists and clergy in intelligence operations, so again, working with religious groups. The center picture is something called the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was a giant network of CIA-funded and directed cultural and media institutions, primarily in Europe, but would come to extend effectively all over the world, where the CIA basically co-opted not just thought leaders in leading magazines, but also musicians, poets. They would even host musical events to attract people in dozens of countries, and then essentially use that as a way to get them aligned like a magnet with the US State Department agenda.
So if you want a present-day example of this, let's talk about all the LGBTQ and pride communities everywhere, because they are jumping out of the ground like mushrooms, and I wonder who is funding all of these organizations. With our tax money, of course.
This year's LGBT Pride March in Paris was one of the hottest, with temperatures around 36 degrees centigrade. But that didn't put off hundreds of thousands of revelers from parading along the 5.5-kilometre route. In North Macedonia, it was the first ever gay pride march. Macedonians are known to be conservative, but they're also keen to join the European Union. And to do that, they need to demonstrate that they tolerate the rights of minorities. It was much cooler in the Finnish capital, Helsinki, but just as exciting for the LGBT community. This year, for the first time, Finland's president attended with his wife. And just 2 days before, Finland's Lutheran Archbishop said it was just a matter of time before his church accepted same-sex marriage.
So who is behind all of this LGBTQ propaganda and funding so suddenly everywhere? Is it the White House? Or do we have to go more up, like the World Economic Forum, maybe?
Today, I'm really proud to sit on WEF's Power of Media Task Force, and GLAAD is a very proud partner of the Partnership for Global LGBTQI Equality, which is also known as PGLE. And PGLE was launched right here in 2019 and is a project of WEF and the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. We work with the news, business, entertainment, faith leaders, sports, governments, and individual activists from around the globe to ensure and educate public people on LGBTQ issues and move policy forward. In the US, the Gallup poll this year showed that over 20% of Gen Z are LGBT. We've been running studies ourselves that include the Q, and so it's LGBTQ, and we expand the age from 18 to 34, and you can see nearly 40% of Gen Zers identify as LGBT.
Now that's nice propaganda that in a few years you go from 1%, not even 1% of the population, to 40% of the population that supposedly would be LGBTQ+.
It's now my deep pleasure and honor to introduce the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Madam President, you have been a friend and a regular participant of our meetings since, I would say, quite some time. And I remember still very vividly when you joined us 5 years ago at the beginning of your first mandate. And nobody knew at that time what great challenges you would have to face. A pandemic, a war. But nevertheless, you were able to give Europe, in addition to managing those crises well, to give Europe new visions, a vision of digital Europe, the Green Deal, to mention only a few. And now you are standing at the beginning of your second mandate. And again, Europe is faced with tremendous challenges. I would say the next 5 years will be crucial. Either we come out as a very reinforced Europe, which is still the same.
Now, isn't he the same guy claiming he penetrated governments everywhere? Did the World Economic Forum use the ignoration of organized political warfare and the intel agencies to take over the American project and strip the US president of his powers?
When you brought the Young Global Leaders Program here for executive education and then the Schwab Fellows. But there are 2 countries in the world now in which the young global leaders have emerged. Tell us just a bit about that in terms of the governance.
Yes, actually, this notion to integrate young leaders is part of the World Economic Forum since many years. And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow. Yeah. Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. I'm with the president, with a young global leader. But what is important for me is those young global leaders have an opportunity to come here. Right. And we have established a course now since several years. And I think this cooperation has a tremendous impact, because being here for a week really creates a strong community. And we, in addition to the young global leaders, we have now the global shapers in 450 cities around the world. I just wonder, is there...
And who is this guy claiming to be the leader of our supposedly democratic elected leaders?
Let me go back
time. You said when you came here, it transformed your life. Was there a course, a professor who really made that difference for you?
Yes, there was one course, one seminar of Henry Kissinger, which really opened my eyes. I wasn't accepted to the seminar, but I sat in. I think he let me in because I was German. And it was relatively shortly after the war. There were not too many Germans here. And this created a friendship which has endured until today. And you know, Henry has been several times in Davos. And I think it was mainly participating in his seminars that I developed my interest for geopolitical affairs. I have met practically every leader in the last 40 years. And there were only 3 or 4 leaders who really made a lasting impression on me and to a certain extent changed my thinking. And one of those was Mandela, another one was my teacher at Harvard 50 years ago, Professor Henry Kissinger. I would like to ask you, what do you draw as a conclusion from the speech of President Xi Jinping?
I think that President Xi's speech was of fundamental significance. It laid out a concept for globalization and some specific challenges and roads to a solution. But to me, the most important aspect was that it was an assertion by China of participating in the construction of an international order. One of the key problems of our period is that the international order with which we were familiar is disintegrating in some respects, and that new elements from Asia and the developing world are entering it. What President Xi has done is to put forward a concept of international order in the economic field that will have to be the subject of conversation and the substance of the creation of an evolving system.
And who is this Kissinger that he is his mentor?
The first time in history foreign policy has become global. Communications are instantaneous, and there exist problems which are genuinely not national, like environment, nuclear proliferation, and similar issues. So in this sense, we are living in a new world, and a new world order will emerge. The only question is whether it will arise out of intellectual and moral insight and by design, or whether it will be forced on mankind by a series of catastrophes. That's the challenge of our period. And it makes it, to my mind, one of the most exciting periods in which anybody can live.
Now let's listen to an old news report from the time when there were still reporters.
Now to a spy thriller unfolding in the heart of suburban Los Angeles. The CIA allegedly brainwashes a woman and turns her into a sex slave to the rich and famous.
It does sound bizarre. Jody Baskerville is here there with this Unit 13 exclusive investigation.
Bryce Taylor used to be your typical soccer mom, with a successful husband, 3 kids, and a beautiful home in the San Fernando Valley. That is, until she started telling of a secret double life as a mind-controlled sex slave for the CIA.
I would have sex with him and deliver whatever messages that I was programmed to deliver.
Now, this one-time suburban housewife finds herself the unlikely leading lady in a real-life psychosexual spy thriller, co-starring a former Los Angeles FBI chief.
Bryce Taylor is absolutely telling the truth. I would stake my name and reputation of 50 years on it.
A UCLA professor of psychiatry.
I'm sure she has no evidence that
the CIA really is doing this.
And a crusading psychologist.
It's what you read about the Holocaust and what they did in the Nazi camps.
Also, the book Transformation America and Access Denied by Cathy O'Brien are also very interesting stuff to read.
Children are being needlessly separated from their families because of the Adoption and Safe Families Act, an executive order transformed into law by Bill and Hillary Clinton in 1997. It takes the money from Social Security funds and gives it to the states to motivate them to withdraw babies.
You have one option at this point. You need to give him to the EMT, and you can go on your merry way with your friends and your family who's out there.
That's not merry at all.
Or I remove him from you and you go to jail. You need to make that decision. You need to make it now, Chris.
I won't let him go.
Okay. Go ahead and jump all the way for me. Okay, please let him go so he does not get hurt, okay? Come here, little buddy. Okay. She's going to jail. Okay.
I just said I couldn't, but I let him go.
Put your hands on your back, please, okay?
They closed the ambulance door. That was the last thing I saw.
Why not? No, go in the car. In the car. It's all right. It's okay.
Cyrus!
It's okay. In the car.
No, let me say bye.
You're gonna make it worse. You're gonna make it worse. Say goodbye.
Every child, once you've added it all up, is worth approximately $1 million to the state. But we've been told that this is a $60 to $80 billion a year industry, meaning the federal government is taking $80 billion a year and giving that money to all of the 50 states to kidnap children.
It's beyond belief. And honestly, Chris, had I not seen this with my own eyes, I could not believe that the federal government has become the white glove delivery service. I mean, literally the middleman of a child trafficking operation.
Yeah, they're running it. I mean, it's
stonewalling this data, hiding it from law enforcement. 320,000 plus children, nobody knows where they are.
Right.
And that's unacceptable.
We have 500,000 children who had sponsors in this country that we can't find.
Dr. Andrea Costides names 160 known cases in which children and young people in SOS children's villages were raped for years by super rich. There are 575 children's villages worldwide with 5,000 employees. Costides provides the evidence and names. Repeatedly, authorities are said to have been involved in these evil machinations.
According to a documentary by French broadcaster N24, the turnover of child abusers is estimated at 300 billion euros worldwide. Around 1 billion of these are in Germany alone. However, the number of unreported cases is far higher.
According to the Federal Criminal Police, more than 18,000 victims of child sexual abuse were recorded in Germany in 2024. According to investigators, the actual number is likely to be significantly higher.
According to an independent commission of inquiry in New Zealand, around 200,000 children, adolescents and disabled people are said to have been abused in state and religious care facilities. The sale of children to well-known personalities suggests a large network. Drugs, violence and electric shocks point to psychological torture as practiced with MK-Ultra.
2 Secret Service agents from Ukraine testified that over 9,000 children have disappeared in the Donbas region. They revealed names and organizations that place children from Ukraine with elite pedophiles in the UK. Both Secret Service agents became victims of an assassination attempt using explosives. One agent and a family member died in the blast. The other agent was injured and went into hiding.
But we still have records of his. Vasily Pracharov uncovered the structures of child trafficking in Ukraine and named names. In doing so, he revealed the entire processes and connections of child trafficking. According to his statements, the children are sent abroad under the pretext of evacuation from the combat zone, either for treatment in British clinics or to study at educational institutions in Great Britain. Babies are also said to be sold on the black market to almost all Western countries under the pretext of surrogacy or adoption. Ukraine's security service is said to be at the forefront of child trafficking.
Former MP Andrew Bridgen conveyed this incriminating evidence from intelligence agents to the police security services and M15, but no action was taken. He also passed on the information on systematic child trafficking and pedophilia of high-ranking personalities to the National Crime Agency, but nothing happened. He then sent all the evidence to high-ranking politicians. The only result of all his efforts against child abuse was that he himself was accused of pedophilia by the police.
The top of the top of, we believe, the pyramid, who are coordinating this crime. You can see why there's no appetite from the establishment to investigate.
Bridgen was accused of being a member of the Freemasons and of participating in ritual child abuse at Masonic meetings. However, Andrew Bridgen testified that he had refused to join the Freemasons 30 years ago and that he never had been a member.
These satanic and criminal networks are very interesting for these agencies because they can procure illegal funds through them and victims for their experiments. And all covered up. In the meanwhile, they can also do 6 sex parties to extort the right people to keep continuing their business. I personally discovered accidentally such a case in 2022 in Austria, the Palmhaus case, for which they had me after abducted with false rape charges after I just reported this to police. And trust me, this is also a very interesting story, which you can read all about in my books The Austrian Criminal System and the Palmhaus Scandal 2022.
Nederland, let op. Rob Jetten krijgt een vraag over de machtige Trilateral Commission. Zijn reactie is verbijsterend.
Meneer Jetten.
Oude beelden.
Goedemiddag. Ik heb gezien dat u lid bent van de Trilateral Commission.
Wat is de Trilateral Commission? Dat staat nog boven het World Economic Forum. En je kan het vergelijken met de Bilderberggroep aan macht, wereldwijde macht. Het is echt ongekend. Zoek het alsjeblieft op als je er nog niet van hebt gehoord.
Dat klopt. En mag ik u zo brutaal zijn om te vragen, door wie bent u gevraagd eigenlijk?
Door mensen die daar lid van zijn.
U heeft geen naam specifiek?
Nee, er is niet specifiek één iemand. Maar ik vind het zelf leuk om andere jonge mensen uit Europa te ontmoeten die proberen de wereld een beetje beter te maken en elkaar te inspireren.
Ja, dus dan weet je nu alvast in ieder geval dat Rob Jetten uitgekozen is door een hele grote organisatie om president te worden. Nadat Kaag was afgevallen, hebben ze waarschijnlijk Rob Jetten een paar jaar lang voorbereid voor deze taak. Het is natuurlijk niet makkelijk voor hem. En dat de gevolgen zullen zijn 100% SDG-doelen doorheen drukken, 100% Great Reset, Build Back Better. En Nederland mag echt verwachten dat ze helemaal kaal geplukt gaan worden. Dat staat ook gaat al rond. En dan heb je dus over you will own nothing and you will be happy. Dat gaat het beleid worden, net als in de coronatijd met die lockdowns.
Since I left CIA, I distinguish between the deep state, which is the Vatican, the Rothschilds, and the Chabad Jews. And then they use the Freemasons and the Knights of Malta as fixers, and they use the City of London, Wall Street, central banks as managers. That's the deep state. Below the deep state is the shadow government, which is comprised of the politicians and senior bureaucrats. Those are the shadow government people, but they're not the deep state. They're the best of the servant class.
Most of the so-called world leaders, they are slaves. If you don't have something they can blackmail with you, they won't let you rise to the top. They need people who are servants. So I went direct to David Rockefeller. I talked to the Rothschild, and they pointed me to the P2 Freemason Lodge, to the people in Switzerland and Italy who are the secret brokers behind this. And they told me they worship the black sun and that they wanted to create a world fascist government controlled by descendants of the Caesars. So even the Jews, the high-level Jews, are slaves to these satanic tyrants.
Well, call them Caesar's descendants.
If you're seeking the real truth, if you want to understand what you are and where we are, this ebook will have answers. Check the link in the profile bio.
Now, reading the book Project Soulcatcher from Dr. Robert Duncan and understanding which technology in bio and AI weapons they are using these days, it's very understandable why they are using satanic cults to disguise themselves and hide between, because they have really scary technology which they can use to make people believe very scary stuff. Now, unfortunately, they tried this technology in 2004 Iraq, and there are people aware of it.
And very, very famous senior folks were involved in this, including many in spaces that you might not expect. Gloria Steinem, for example, the famous feminist, was funded by the Congress for Cultural Freedom. It was at the time when our State Department was beginning to project that as a means to win the Cold War by getting people in Central and Eastern Europe to become more feminist in order to oppose and angry them up against the patriarchal substructures of society in everywhere east of Germany.
Now, these days, they are using this programming to program our children with very sick ideas, so I cannot stay quiet any longer. And I think it's very important that everybody realizes this predictive programming and what it is doing to our children.
Emotional, spiritual, sexual, physical torture of children through a ceremony where the devil, Satan, is worshipped through blaspheming God by mocking the death and resurrection of Jesus.
If your ultimate goal is to be famous, then you're gonna do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil. Like you're gonna.
Thank you to Satan for giving me inspiration on how to play this role.
children will love us, and your children will join us. We're coming for your children. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children.
Flash forward to 2016, and then I'll wrap. As our NGO sphere and university centers and media organizations and union groups and cultural groups all developed this favors for favors relationship, this mutual, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, I'll do what you want on this thing and I'll get a grant from the State Department or USAID or the National Science Foundation. As what we are up against here is actually this network, this blob, this congealed shape that where you have the intelligence state is actually serving the public-facing functions of government. It is simply, the CIA is simply a support agency for the State Department on national interest grounds and the Pentagon on national security grounds. And so when you see the CIA do something or the intelligence state do something, understand that this is to serve a State Department official or a Pentagon official or the stakeholders around that. It's really not a rogue agency in the sense that it answers to the State Department and it does the dirty work. Maybe I'll close with I guess I'll close with a Sopranos reference since my mother and father are here. And I think the best way to understand it is, if you're familiar, Tony Soprano is running the is running this mafia outfit in New Jersey, and he's got these goons, these enforcers who do the plausibly deniable dirty work, so that the FBI, who's tracing Tony Soprano's calls, can't say that Tony did it. And so there's this character Furio, who is the sort of brawn, and he breaks into people's homes and beats them up and undermines their democracy, if you will. And it's very natural to look at that if you are in that home and it is your democracy being destroyed. It is your friends and family being arrested and say, oh, the CIA did that. Look, I'm sorry, Furio did that. But they are, what's gone rogue is actually something much deeper than just the intelligence state. It's actually the entrenched forces in diplomacy and in defense that the CIA is tasked with to do this dirty work. So I guess I'll stop there for questions, or if we have time for Q&A.
I'm going to tell you the truth. And Flynn told me don't protect these people anymore. So here it is. The truth is, as those charts show, in July of 2009, the CIA started funding. And this all came out. Alex Jones was a little confused in our conversation. It was not a Doge report. But Elon, one of the things Doge did was it surfaced data that the public can now come in and research themselves. So we had a researcher go in, brother of a guy you know, went in, great researcher. He went through this Doge data and he found this remarkable thing. There's a company, an NGO in Arlington, Virginia, CEPS, that going to be a lot of focus on it. It's been staffed forever by George Soros, and the Open Society staffs it. And the money comes in from the USAID, which we all know now is what? What's the USAID? It's a front for the CIA. It's all yeah. And they have since July 09 been spreading these computer systems in 26 nations, and they call it modernizing. They go into countries from Ecuador to Estonia and say, "We're going to help you modernize your elections. No more of these silly paper elections. Oh, that's so old-fashioned. We have these beautiful computers you can run your elections on." Billions of dollars we have spent putting Smartmatic in 26 nations, and every nation within 2 or 3 years of that has this left lurch in their elections. In other words, the CIA has flipped 26 nations left. A total of 72 nations have been affected. The others were probably China flipping them left. But it's our CIA is deeply involved in this. And they were trying to get they were trying to get Tulsi to take that out. We're going to see if they succeeded.
We'll see. Lots remain to be seen. Wow. Patrick, you just dropped a whole load of information on us. This is good news. So step forward. I have that report that you're referencing related to SEPs. I'm going to get clearance to release that on my Substack so that everyone can come through that and familiarize themselves with what you're talking about.
You have the report already?
Yeah.
Wow. Mazel tov.
No, not the report given to Tulsi, but the open source information related to SEPs with all those graphs.
Oh, yeah. You should put that up and show people. It's very clear. It was SEPs. You should focus on SEPs. The creation of the people of Soros, the money from the CIA, USAID, then SEPs spread this technology everywhere. It's sickening.
That is sickening. Serbia, SEPs, and this report that is very damning to our very own agency. Patrick Byrne, thank you so much for pulling over. I know you're traveling. You pulled over.
Yeah, Epstein was, I have information, I mentioned, they offered me to be Epstein 2.0 after I turned him down. And because I knew that when Epstein sent me this hard invitation, like a couple times people crossed my paths and, oh, Jeffrey was talking to you, Patrick, he really wants you. I knew it was all to set me up. So I didn't go, but I knew they were setting me up to keep me quiet. What's really gone on is there are low-digit thousands of people who took part and either were filmed having sex with a kid or eating baby brains. And maybe they don't
baby brains.
Maybe they don't want to eat baby brains, but they're told you don't get your $100 million contract until, remember what P. Diddy was doing with guys like LeBron. Well, that same kind of stuff is going on. And the perps are royalty from across Europe, parliamentarians, diplomats from around the world, bankers, the world's elite, several thousand of them, I've been told, are actually on tape. And the big, by a knowledgeable insider, and the big hubbub is like, would the world melt down if we find out?
The government fears Alex Jones, who has the largest audience in the country, bigger than any of the networks, the biggest megaphone in the country.
The deep state hates Alex Jones with a vengeance.
Alex Jones is the most extraordinary person I've ever met.